Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming to our career fair. We have a great panel here in front of me. I'm going to actually let them introduce themselves and perhaps talk a little bit about the organisations they represent. Is that okay with you guys if we start like that? Fantastic. I'm looking at you, Mr. Lee, first. Gareth, would you like to start, please?
Sure, yeah. So I'm the manager with Screen Skills Ireland. We're the skills development unit within Screen Ireland, which is obviously the agency that supports the screen industry in Ireland. So that's a lot of Ireland's in one sentence, isn't it? So I guess our role is to support the industry through various different skills development initiatives. So that would be across animation, TV, film, VFX, a little bit in the games and immersive tech space as well. And we do that mostly through continuous professional development programs that we offer out for all those sectors, from new entrants up to company leaders, and that would include certified programs, not certified programs, short programs, long programs, and so on. We also offer funding schemes to support the sector in the areas of bursaries, mentoring, stakeholders, and other areas as well. And then we also oversee the skills development requirements linked to the Section 481 tax credit as well. And finally, we also look at skills needs in the industry, and we publish an annual report that looks at skills needs, current and future skills needs.
Great, thanks, Gareth. Birch, hi, how are you?
I think.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about your organisation?
My name is Birch Hamilton, and I run the Screen Directors Guild of Ireland, and we're currently just under 300 film directors or directors working in live action TV, animation, documentary and commercials, and we represent directors through lobbying, advocacy and our campaigns as well, and particularly we help them with legal, career advice, mentorship, and we have a collection society agreement with Directors UK, so we also oversee the collection of rights for directors. And then we run a number of events over the year, which include master classes and networking events for directors working in the industry.
Thanks, Birch. And Greg, hi, how are you? Thanks for coming along.
Hello. So I'm Greg Keeley. My company is APE Limited, which is a model making company based here in Ireland. I'm also a director for Screen Guilds Ireland, which is a company set up representing 2,200 crew of filming in Ireland. And then we are also connected with the Model Makers Guild of Ireland, which is a similar sort of, it's a guild within a bunch of guilds, if you like, representing the model makers within the film industry of Ireland. So we work mainly within film production and TV production, within Ireland especially, but abroad as well. So we have contacts in a database that work all over the world, not just in the country of Ireland, but mostly it's for Irish crew working in Ireland. That's it.
Thanks, Greg. So guys, you can see where we're kind of going with this in terms of the industries we'll be focused on in this conversation. So I guess maybe we'll start the ball rolling to sort of, I guess, misquote William Goldman, nobody knows nothing. Do we know anything about, you know, where we are in the industry now, and where it is we might be going? Because I mean, we're very lucky in Ireland. We have a thriving audiovisual sector. We have an audiovisual sector that has got global reach, but I guess we're at a nexus in terms of what next. And I guess the guys who are listening here today are going to be interested in finding out what they can expect from the business and what the business can expect from them. So maybe we'll start with, given we don't have crystal balls, unfortunately, Gareth, would you maybe start a little bit about, you know, what you think the landscape is like now and where you think, you know, it's going in terms of the graduates?
Yeah, I suppose first of all to say, you know, I've been around the sector for a long time, and I have to say it's my experience that it's a fantastic industry. I'm sure the other panelists would agree. There are ups and downs like any other sector, I suppose, but it's a very rewarding sector. And I think, to me, and one of the reasons I'm heavily involved in it is just, you know, I truly believe in the importance of storytelling, and I think storytelling is critical. It has an economic value, but I think it also has a, you know, social, cultural, and even a wellness value, which I think we've all come to recognise during the pandemic. You know, we've all reached out to stories to get us through tough times. So I think in terms of storytelling and in terms of content, it's as important as it ever was, if not maybe even more. And I think, you know, in terms of big picture, I guess the future is bright in that sense. There's never been a better time for content, you know, or more demand for content globally, obviously, but I think that applies to Ireland as well. So I think, you know, obviously we can't kind of not say, you know, or not mention the pandemic. So the pandemic has been very tough. Obviously it's had a huge impact, but I guess just in terms of graduates who want to focus on the positives, I think the future is very bright. As I said, there's huge demand for content. There are kind of indicators, I suppose, within Ireland that the sector will grow in Ireland, which we can talk about a little bit later. But also what I think is important is the sector is becoming more positive. I find, is certainly in the last few years, has become a more positive place. I think it's becoming more structured, and certainly a lot of the work that we're doing around Screen Skills Ireland in terms of you know, section 481 and skills development, developing out things like a competency framework for the sector. The fact that Greg mentioned, you know, they're now, you know, there's a lot of crew guilds structured through Screen Guilds of Ireland and so on. I just think there's a lot of positive things to be hopeful for in terms of the growth of the sector going forward.
And if I could just stay with you for a minute, Gareth, because, you know, myself included, many of us are all graduates of the wonderful Screen Training Ireland courses that are on offer. You know, they're absolutely fantastic. And, you know, I'm just wondering, you know, for our graduates, when they're, you know, released into the community, when we finish up with them, you know, what do you feel is still kind of missing, you know, in terms of skills they could look to develop, and how does Screen Training Ireland maybe look at that in terms of that gap?
Yeah, so I think, yeah, I mean, we all hear about the gap quite regularly. And, you know, the work I do across Screen Skills it looks at that, as does, you know, sorry, I just should also mention, I didn't mention in the intro, I also work with Animation SkillNet and have involvement with other SkillNets as well, and that's an area they're focused on too. So I think the gaps can be different depending on the person, depending on the role, depending on the sector, and so on. So it's not an easy thing to pinpoint, but a lot of the time, I think it's around a couple of different areas. I think sometimes it's around specialist skills. So sometimes if you want to be a particular, you know, you want to do a particular role within the industry, sometimes just having the special skills that are linked specifically to that role can be missing or need to be developed a bit more. I think sometimes it's broader than that. Sometimes I think it's about soft skills. In fact, a lot of the time it can be about soft skills. So that includes everything like communication skills, teamwork, all of the kind of things that we would associate as being important with the screen industry. Sometimes it's even just about basic skills, like things like set etiquette, health and safety, just things that, you know, timekeeping, things that, you know, are basic fundamentals for a lot of jobs. So sometimes it's about that as well. So I think it can be a mix of things. But I think the important thing is there are opportunities there. I suppose one thing I would say, and I think, sorry, it came up, someone mentioned it earlier on in a previous conversation. I just think things like, you know, resilience and determination and enthusiasm, things like that go an awful long way. You know, skills can be learned. And by the way, I would say that, and it's my experience with Screen Skills Ireland, because all we do is offer courses, continuous professional development courses all the time. The reality is you're always learning in this industry. I'm sure the other panelists would agree with that. You're never done. So I don't think anyone's ever going to say, I'm finished now, I don't have anything else to learn. So I think the important things are probably more around that you're enthusiastic, that you're dedicated, that you work really hard, and that you're willing to learn. Because you know, most parts of your job or your role will be, you know, can be learned. The last thing I would just add before I let the others come in is just I think it's really important to be clear and know what role you want to do. I think sometimes we don't talk enough about all the roles that are available in the screen industry. There are well over 200 roles, and I suppose I'm talking about the screen industry in a very general way, but there's, I think on our careers and screen side, I think there's over 250 roles actually listed there. So knowing which role you want to do, knowing yourself and what your strengths and weaknesses are and which role you're suited to, I think is fundamental. So I just wanted to make that point as well.
Great, thanks, Gareth. So maybe I'll go to you if we're talking about all the roles, Greg, you know, and the guilds, and I guess, you know, for our graduates and they are sort of entering into their decided role, or maybe their undecided role is yes, how do the guilds kind of support new entrants, or are kind of things that, you know, they should bear in mind as graduates when they're, you know, trying to even become members of guilds? Or, you know, in my day, you had to get tickets signed and you had to have flight hours, you know, you had to be on set a certain amount of time, and someone would either sign your ticket or not. But I mean, I know it's a lot different now and we don't have the same rules and regulations. So in terms of these graduates, college and getting in,
there are similar things being introduced now since the guilds have set up, with training and stuff like that as well. Like Gareth has said, like there's a lot more training available, which is really good. But specifically with the guilds, if you like Gareth was saying, if you know the area you want to go into, whether you want to go into set deck or props, or in our case model making, there is specific guilds now that you can approach, and you can look for an application to join that guild. Then within the guild, there is support network there, so you can do. Before COVID kicked in, obviously we were setting up a lot of social gatherings and stuff like that, but since COVID has sort of put a stop to all of that, and Zoom has now become the place where people congregate to sort of communicate and discuss what's going on in the industry. So it's kind of good in that sense. There's also the platform for calls for crew. Again, that wouldn't have been something that you would have had before the guilds were set up. You would have just sent out emails, had a portfolio, maybe knocked on a few doors and hoped for the best that you could actually get somewhere with it all. Whereas now with the guilds, we actually have a WhatsApp group and a forum and stuff like that. So there's the email going out the whole time, but as well as that, there's as simple as a WhatsApp message goes out every now and then to say there's a call for crew on whatever production that's starting up. So that's very good. As far as the support network goes, like there's a lot more training and awareness for what training is needed in each of the different departments. For us, again, with the model makers especially, we're very hands-on, so there's a lot of making requirements. So you'd work with woodwork, metalwork, as well as going into the digital and electronics in the more recent productions. So a lot of that has helped not just the networking, but the upskilling and the grading system within the departments. So there's not as much a ticket form anymore. You don't have to get approval from a HOD to say you did certain things. You can now go on these courses and they get attached to your CV as part of your skill network and that kind of thing, which helps potential employers understand the amount of dedication you're given to your craft as well. Like someone who does all of those courses is obviously showing that they're prepared to give quite a lot to the workplace, if you know what I mean. So that can go in your favor the more than that you have and that kind of thing. But just to finish on what Gareth was saying about the industry at the moment, like the pandemic kicked in and everyone was really worried about the industry, because the first time we had a lull in the industry was around the last recession, and quite a lot of jobs went, and film wasn't really in Ireland for a few years. But luckily it's gone the opposite way around. We had a break of 5 months, but then it was deemed that workers in film and TV production were going to be essential workers because they needed content. And all of a sudden, the country is just booming. There's lots and lots of work and lots of productions running at this moment in time, and a good few setting up very soon. So it's a good time to be coming into the industry, just to end it on a positive note there.
Sure. Which, Birch, that brings me, you, of course, you know, lucky the other crew members, the directors, of course, the journey is a little more complicated and maybe a little harder, and not for the faint-hearted, you know. So what struck me is, you know, at the beginning you were saying there are 300 directors in the Guild in Ireland. Will you talk to me a little bit? I mean, I know you do great work in the Guild, and there's directors from all walks of life across all the genres and formats. Will you tell me a little bit about, you know, or talk a little bit about, in general, what is a director's experience, you know, in that gap between leaving college? What do they tend to do before they can, you know, we can call ourselves directors, but we're, you know, a director must direct. So what in your experiences are the directors' experiences when they, you know, leave and try and find that first job?
Yeah, well, I think it's, first of all, I want to say that, like what Greg said, it's a very exciting time to be in the industry. And I'm thinking about a student coming out as a director. Industry globally has doubled in 2013. So that's 96 billion revenue going into content. So as a student, it's an incredibly exciting time. But also, Jean, to your point, it is a very competitive space. And I think the key is, one thing is flying hours, is to get hours as a director. So there is, like you said, Jean, a gap between, you know, landing on a TV show or a film and on the short term. And I think that, you know, in your students' careers, which I think is really interesting, is that, you know, for most of your students, they've had relatively little interference in the kind of maybe author-driven work that they wanted to make. And now there's this really interesting point where they're going to hit this BAM of the market and a highly competitive environment where it's about audience, it's about market. So what I would say is it's a shift in mindset, and I'm not saying it's either or. You can obviously be an author and drive your story and tell your authentic story, and that's still incredibly important, but it's meeting it with that awareness of market and demands and like bottom line, what stakeholders want and need in return for their investment, and that's very legitimate. So the key to that, I would say, is to really have an awareness of the market, is to read the trades. And I think anyone who has success in the industry is kind of almost obsessional OCD about reading the trades and knowing what's successful. But that point is a really difficult point, Jean. And I would say that to your students is they may feel, and I've had so many conversations with directors just after they leave, they don't even want to call themselves directors. They're like, I'm not directing. And just to remember that, you know, many of the great directors, from our own Lenny Abramson to other world-renowned directors, you name them, any directors, Dervla Walsh, Nessa Hardy working today, have had gaps. There's peaks and troughs and in the industry, and it's about what Kieran Foy said, weathering the storm and kind of building a long-term strategy, and it might be over 10 to 15 years of what you're going to do. So I would be also say, yes, it's flying hours, but I would say to directors is, you know, be careful what you pick as well, because you are building a portfolio and building a career, and some directors have regretted going into some areas because it's actually taken further. So like what one of your speakers was saying earlier, it's a long game, you know, of a 10 to 15 year plan of where you want to be at the end, and to think about, you know, with, you know, if you can get an agent. So I think that that's the key thing in that gap is if you can, getting an agent. Most of our directors say that getting the agent was the hardest part of their job, and then after they got the agent, you know, the work just starts to flow in. And the good news is, you know, the industry is really vibrant and robust. We recovered. Don't know where cinema is going to end up right now. There's still a lot of unanswered questions where we'll land at the end of the pandemic. But in terms of the SVOD spending, you know, Netflix just announced at their last quarter that they've doubled their global, or their UK, of which Ireland is included, spending to 2 billion. So it's that idea, if we can get more of that investment into Ireland, as the two other panelists said and Gareth said, the future is very bright.
No, sure. Somebody sent me a good meme halfway through the pandemic and said, when is Netflix 2 out? I've finished Netflix 1, you know, so I think we have a huge demand, you know, and so I would say to graduates, there is a golden age for coming out, you know, and I expect there's a golden age now where, you know, we have so much more thought being put into gender parity and all those things. I mean, they couldn't be coming out at a better time. But to take, I think it's a good point you've made, Birch, you know, you have to be singular and obsessed, especially in the, you know, in the more creative end of it. Not that it's not all creative, but, you know, that's, you have to wake up in the morning because they're wanting to be this, because that's where the gaps are, I would imagine. You know, I guess in the film school, you know, it's tough. We don't, you know, I guess one of the things we try to do is sort of say, be distinctive, be original, give yourself that edge, obviously be professional and show up on time and, you know the business. But the one thing we can't emulate is real world, you know, because they're not paying the price, you know, so they're not working with the equipment that in the real world, nor are they sort of, you know, working on the big sets for long periods of time. So I know we touched on it slightly earlier with Gareth, but perhaps amongst, you know, what are the sort of the key attributes really? I know we talked about soft skills, but even if these students could come away with a list of, if you will, not to be negative, but you guys are at the other edge, you meet our graduates, and what do you know, if we could just give them a list of things they need to improve on or audit themselves for before they get out, and that can be as basic as not answering the phone with how you know, which I find quite a lot, you know, so perhaps you could just maybe compile a list for things they could check on themselves, and that might be even how they present themselves or what that first email to a person looks like, or being on time or fortitude. Would anyone like to start with that?
I'll jump in just to it. The making end of things, the most important thing is your portfolio. So you have to have a really strong portfolio, and that goes across all the different departments as well. If you can get experience, that's great, but in the most part, a decent portfolio that focuses on your strengths. And similar to what Birch was saying, if you know the field you want to get into, go for it in that direction. So be biased with what you put into your visual portfolio. A lot of people nowadays do it through a website. So if you can make the website yourself, that's great. But if you can't, do get in touch with somebody to make one for you, because that is how you are seen. That's the first thing they will see. It's a very visual industry. So it's important that you come across strong in that sense as well. You know what I mean? But mostly focus on your strengths. Go after the work that you want, and that's the best way to find that you will get that job eventually, I think.
Yeah. And I suppose, Birch, that thing we're talking about in terms of getting yourself an agent as a director, you know, what do you think will distinguish the sort of graduate or recent graduate, you know, for an agent enough to pick, you know, enough for an agent to pick up rather?
Well, I think it's build, I would say, build your team. If you are leaving college now, you need a team around you of people that believe in you, that will champion you. And that's everything from a producer. If you look at really successful directors, they have that partner producer that just believes in them and makes, you know, whatever's coming on downstream next. And yes, to get an agent as well. You know, an agent, so there's a various amount of team building you need, but I would say that it is incredibly social. So to build community and to, you know, make friends with the people around you and the community of your fellow students, there's a lot of value and worth in that. And I would say develop that, because if you look at a lot of the other directors, and I'm always looking at what makes a successful director, what I've noticed is that it's a lot of college or long-term friendships that they've managed to keep going over the years. So really look at the people around you, the closest to you, because there's a lot of value in that. And Jean, you mentioned about getting an agent. Oh, I wish I knew the answer to how to.
No, of course, but I guess maybe in your experience, maybe with dealing with the directors, what was the kind of, or what was the work that got a young director noticed by an agent, would you say, in general? I mean, I know there's no hard and fast to it, but is it original work? Is it competent? Is it work that's well done? Is it a mixture of both, you know?
I mean, I think it depends what you're saying, but I do think, yes, it is original work. It is that author piece with a very, very strong vision, because you have to have your own personality, your own originality, your own authentic voice. And yes, you may have to put that aside when you're working on a TV show, but to have that. And also I would say there is a timing issue with agents about picking the right time that works for you. And often it is like, let's be very, very practical here. Agents want to make money off your commission when they get hired. So it's not in an agent's interest to sit and take on a director who's not working, who's not turning. So it's about churning over as much product as possible, if I'm going to put it in a really crude term. So being able to sell, you know, or get on a show at that right time is a really valuable time to go to an agent saying, I've just finished a script, or I've just made this film, or it's just coming at a festival, with a bit of heat. So if you can build some heat and interest around you and kind of create you know, an excitement around you, that's a really good time to go. If you're there, a lot of what agents do is they say, great, I'll wait. So you can kind of, it's known as courting, like agents will just kind of keep an eye on you. But to really, there's a magic time as well to approach an agent.
For sure. You know, and I think we're all in agreement, you know, that one of the most important things is, you know, community, but out of community comes networks, you know. And Gareth, first of all, I think you guys knocked it out of the park in the pandemic with all the courses. You seem to answer all the needs, and you did such fantastic courses over the last year. And as I said, being a graduate of many of them, I love the fact that when we're on these courses, we meet peers. You know, it can be lonely being a filmmaker, you know, and it can be lonely when you're starting off, you know, and oftentimes we need to feel we're part of a group, as well as it being a lifelong learning journey. Gareth, you know, there's a lot of people looking to get onto the courses now, I guess, and that's your big problem. You know, you have so many people and a few spaces on the courses. So graduates getting onto one of those courses, you know, they don't always have the CV that might get them onto one of the drama writing courses, for example, or whatever. You know, any thoughts on how they could kind of bridge that gap to get onto, you know, those blue chip courses that you guys run?
Yeah, I suppose, well, just to say, it's not just ourselves. There are other kind of providers out there as well, like the skill nets that I mentioned before. Yeah, so
you're the best.
Sorry?
You're the best.
Oh,
you're the best, though.
Great. Can I talk to you every day, Jean? So, but I mean, just to say, and look, at actually, I think what the pandemic has brought home is just the amount of resources and courses available online, not just what we've been offering, but just huge amounts. I wish I could actually go and attend all of them myself, to be honest. Yeah. But yeah, look at a couple of things. I think networking is so critical, like you mentioned, and one of the downsides, it's not even really maybe a downside, but one of the slight downsides was because we can't meet together for courses and events and conferences, is that networking dimension has been lost a little bit. Now we kind of try and replicate it through the courses, and actually I think a lot of people enjoyed the courses, not because necessarily the content of the courses, but actually coming together, as you said, Jean, and meeting with peers and supporting each other during a very difficult time. So I think they're really important, and they're part of that networking piece, but I think networking is definitely crucial, so I did want to say that. But yeah, I think, look, the one downside, I suppose, is when we moved online, we're just limited in terms of the amount of places. So yeah, we definitely, you know, for some courses we had well over 150 applicants for 15 places. That's the kind of territory we were in. So where we could, we obviously ran programs more than once, but that's not always possible either because of availability of tutors and so on. So I think, you know, I suppose a few things what we did to try and address that is we offered out a lot of webinars, which we don't have to kind of restrict the amount of attendees. So I think we had, you know, over 50, maybe I think it was over 50 within the last, say, year or so of webinars, which were unrestricted. I think we had about 4,000 or so people attend those webinars over the 20 months. So I think there are things, you know, even if you don't get on a course, I would keep trying, but there are other things out there like webinars, you know, other providers as well. So and the other thing, I suppose, is we try as much as possible to vary what we do and pitch it at different levels. So sometimes we have programs that are, as you say, for more experienced professionals, and it's harder for new graduates to get on those. But we also try and run courses that are for people who are kind of getting into the industry as well. And we have, I should mention them here, we have some what we would call access programs. Passport to Production is one, which is kind of a 1 week program that kind of gears you up for going on to a set, and we've run that, and that's kind of specifically tailored for new entrants to the industry. On the other side with animation, we have a graduate traineeship program and an apprenticeship program, which again are work-based learning pitched at kind of new graduates coming out. So there are opportunities there. Unfortunately, for some of our courses, yes, you do have to have a bit of experience, but as I said, you're learning throughout your lifestyle, so we do need to pitch those courses at different levels for that reason.
Sure. I think we're going to have to wrap up quickly enough. I'm getting text messages here, I hope. I guess, in summation, really, there's a few, golden points to take from our conversation. Obviously, the potency of having building and maintaining a network, because these jobs are not advertised necessarily. You don't open the Irish Times on a Friday and say director looked, wanted, or whatever, or production designer. So it is about building that network. I guess we'd be in agreement, and often I have students who think, I'm not that person. I find it terribly hard to speak to people, or walking into a room makes my my blood freeze. But I guess we'd agree that it's a step one must take. You don't have to be the funniest person in the room or the brightest, but you do have to make that step into embracing, your new family, I guess. So that is something graduates would need to think about, I guess. Part, and they would probably, also, what is showing up on time is often, and being professional, that thing that bridges the gap between being a student and kind of, going, I missed the 46A, doesn't really wash, I guess, in the real world anymore. Yeah. Greg's going, no way, absolutely not, you're fired. And finding a way to announce yourself to the world, I guess, what is that talent you have, why is it at least of a standard, the same standard?
I think we've lost Jean.
Did I lose the audio? Oh.
Yeah, we might have lost her.
It looks like she's stuck.
Oh.
Hi,
I might just jump in there for a second.
It's jumping in.
Good on you.
I
just wanted to add that people can look for IFTN as well, is a good one, the Irish Film TV Network. On that website there, it shows what productions are in pre-production, what are developed, and what have already come up, and that kind of thing. It's a good one. And then IMDb is another one where if you find the sort of production that you're into in IMDb, they also recommend different ones that they're working on at the same time. It's a good way to find out what's up and coming and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Can I add something? Oh, sorry.
Go on, Gareth.
Oh yeah, I was going to add something as well. I think it'd be useful for the graduates to know. We're working on building a new crew database at the moment. It's something that we will launch later this year, and that's going to be for the whole industry. And we're hoping that everyone will sign up to it, and there'll be a space on that for graduates as well. And through that crew database, then we hope to do things like Greg mentioned earlier, like crew calls, listing upcoming projects, things like that. So when we launch that later in the year, it'd definitely be a good thing for graduates to sign up for that.
That's brilliant. And actually, we do have a question here. Any advice for live action storyboard artists, please? I'm thinking that's a no.
Other than I think what Greg said earlier on about just making sure that you present your portfolio in the best way, choose your best work. I think what some of the conversation to me has been about today predominantly is just being distinctive, like standing out, because it is a competitive marketplace, as everyone has kind of said, and stand out, but for the right reasons. So don't be the one who's late, be the one who's early, be the one who's enthusiastic, and so on. And the same applies with something like that, to just stand out in terms of your work, the quality of your work, the style of storyboards reflective of the kind of work you want to do, or the kind of role you're applying for. That kind of thing, I think, is always useful to take on board.
Absolutely. I think as well, you make a really great point there. It is about the quality of the work, not the quantity.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Even if it means that you sort of like make up your own stories and just keep the flow going, and to, again, just not necessarily content filler, but if it's decent quality, it can help get you up the ladder a little bit quicker. And then networking, obviously get in touch with directors and designers and that sort of thing, the people who will require that skill. There's no point in getting in touch with the model maker if you want to get into storyboarding, because it's not our world, you know.
Exactly.
I also think I've
Know
got
your audience.
Another.
sorry.
I was going to say on the story, or sorry.
No, go.
I was going to say on the storyboard thing, because I just remember a storyboard artist giving me this recommendation before that it's sometimes good to just pick your favorite scene from a movie and then storyboard it, and pick a really bad scene from a movie and storyboard it as well, and see what works, what doesn't work, and kind of figure out why. So I think that was a good piece of advice I heard before, so just thought I'd share there as well.
And I think on the thing you might finish off on, though, really, and it strikes me, making films or TV or being in the audio, it's about their long-term projects. And I think the thing is, people, students, graduates, even people working there now have to realize that you're going to be in the trenches with these people for quite a while, either developing your project or indeed in the making of them. And when that's done, you're going to meet them on this, the second time around. So I think the things you have to bear in mind also as graduates, to thine own self be true. You have to be, honourable, professional, committed, because, even though we're talking about it being a big, bustling industry, it's a very small one. So, you have to maintain, that sense of being honorable, creative, committed, and professional at all stages, because it's hard to get away. It's hard if you make a mistake. It's hard, to shake that one off, I think is a good thing to remember.
Well, I think on that note, I just have one more quick question, and then we'll bring this to a close. And this is actually just, I'm sure I know the answer to this. Where will this be, Gareth, this database? How can people get involved? Oh, I think you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, we're just developing it at the moment, so I think we're a few months away. But it'll be on online, obviously, and we'll put out a big publicity push whenever we launch it.
Great. Well, listen, thank you so much. It is my great pleasure to have you guys here in IDT, and a special thanks to Jean Rice for her facilitation of this session. Birch, yeah, I know, I'll give that to Greg. Greg and Gareth, and actually in the wings is Alicia. She just couldn't get on. There's a technical problem that we couldn't solve, unfortunately, but we're going to be bringing her back to talk to graduates and undergraduates before the end of the academic year, and a different platform for her. So thank you all very much, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks very much. Thanks, everybody.
Paddy's Day.
Oh, Paddy's Day indeed. Yeah. Take care.
Such as it is.
See you soon. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.